Good morning. I'm going to call to order this regular meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee for Thursday, November 14th. My name is Jeremy Schrader, and I'm the chair of this committee. With me at the dais are Councilmember Reich, Councilmember Goodman, and Councilmember Gordon. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. We've got 5 items on today's agenda, including a quasi-judicial hearing and a discussion item, and we'll first handle the consent agenda. Item number 2 is the referring to staff an ordinance striking the owner occupancy requirement pertaining to accessory dwelling units. Item number 3 is a vacation resolution application submitted by the Metropolitan Council. And item number 4 consists of a rezoning and alley vacation submitted, application submitted by Pinnacle Management for a new mixed-use building at Broadway and Bryant. Staff has recommended to me that that this vacation application should be postponed while some ownership issues are finalized. So I'll move approval of parts 1 through 4 relating to the rezoning applications, and we'll move to continue parts 5 and 6 of this item relating to the vacation application until our January 23rd, 2022 meeting. Is there any discussion of these items, or any committee members like to pull anything off?
2020 or 2022?
Oh, I'm sorry, 2020. Got a little bit ahead of myself. Any other discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor, vote aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Moving on to item number 1 is the consideration of appeal submitted by Niclas Ellis regarding the Planning Commission's denial of a site plan review for two one-story commercial buildings and a drive-through at 4159 Hiawatha Avenue. And we'll begin first with the staff presentation.
Good morning, Chair Schrader and council members. The site before you is at 4159 Hiawatha Avenue. This went before the Planning Commission on October 21st. It's an application for site plan review to allow 2 new one-story buildings and a drive-through. The Planning Commission denied the application for site plan review, and an appeal was filed by the owner on October 29th. So this site is located at the northeast corner of Hiawatha and 42nd. This did come through to Planning Commission last year with a different but somewhat similar proposal, where it was a 4-story building proposed with a very similar site plan. This is now back because the applicant has decided not to build the 3 stories of apartments above the first floor at this time. So it's the proposed buildings include a Starbucks drive-through, which is located to the interior of the site, and then a kind of liner building that would include a restaurant and offices. This is very similar to the site plan that was approved last year, but now does not include the housing component. And this is a rendering of the new proposed building. So since this project has been in the works for quite a while, it went to PDR over 1.5 years ago. Initially, at that time, traffic did not have any specific concerns about circulation on the site. However, in the last 1.5 years, there have been a lot of changes with regards to how traffic has been evaluating similar sites that allow left turns into a busy drive-through or retail area, especially when it's adjacent to a corridor and thoroughfare like Hiawatha. So this site, Public Works and planning staff have concerns that left turns into the site would potentially back up into the intersection of Hiawatha Avenue and 42nd. And I have Alan from traffic here who can speak to that a little bit more. So initially, staff had recommended approval of the application with 2 conditions that basically restricted left turns into and out of the site. So requiring that the applicant design the curb cut driveway and signage to only allow left turns in and out, and that also the applicant work with Public Works to potentially construct a median or something else that would permanently prohibit left turns into the site. So as you can see on this aerial view, the eastbound lane on 42nd is only one lane. There's no opportunity for turning because of the 3 lanes that allow for turning movements and through movements going westbound into the Hiawatha intersection. And here's just another photo showing that, where there's also kind of that slip lane for right turns that feeds into 42nd. This is a proposal that the applicant had submitted after the initial submittal, which shows some modifications to the right-of-way that would potentially allow for the striping of a left turn lane. Staff is still not recommending approval of this proposal. It would require cutting into the public right-of-way on the pedestrian realm and boulevard on the south side to widen the lanes. It would add an additional lane, which adds additional pedestrian travel time across 42nd, and could still have queuing problems with left turns. So staff is recommending approval of the application. The Planning Commission did deny the application on the 21st with specific stated concerns about vehicular traffic circulation and pedestrian safety. So I will stand for questions and then I will kick it to Alan.
I'm not seeing any questions. Thanks very much. I'm sorry, did I miss a question over there? Okay.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Again, my name is Alan Klugman. I'm with the Department of Public Works in the Traffic and Parking Services Division. I'm a traffic engineer. And I'll add to what Lindsay said and probably repeat some of what she said, and maybe make a few more comments from a Public Works perspective. And I'll be using the overhead here. As get that centered a little better. As Lindsay mentioned, our big concern from a Public Works perspective is all about safety. And I'll just be real clear. We do not think there's a safe way to handle left turns in and out of this site on 42nd, this close and adjacent to Hiawatha. And I just want to kind of underscore the fact that safety has always been a very important part of what we do in Public Works, certainly in the traffic division. I think the last year or two, it's even elevated. It's probably the prime initiative that we have going on in our department. I put this up just for reference. I know you're all very familiar with it, our Vision Zero Action Plan. And I just want to stress that that informs really all of what we do in Public Works. It's why we're at the legislature this spring, arguing on behalf of cities getting the right to set our own speed limits. It informs our bike master plan. It even, of course, informs things like site plan review. And we really are looking at things, I'd say, with a tighter focus than we have in the past. And the big thing we're concerned with is access in and out of these sites. And I'm just going to repeat some of what Lindsay said, but again, kind of maybe put my own perspective on it. With 42nd here, this adjacent to Hiawatha, in the queues that develop along 42nd, we strongly felt there's no way to safely get cars in and out via left turns. And I just want to talk to the two conditions that Lindsay mentioned and reflect what our perspective was from Public Works. The first condition was to design the driveway, design it and sign it, stripe it and so forth in such a manner that only right turns in and out would be made and prohibit left turns. The second condition, I want to be real clear on this, the second condition was like an overlay on top of that first condition. And what the second condition basically said was, and if Public Works does not feel that the design you put forward would positively prohibit the left turns, then you're obligated to work with us to come up with something in the public right-of-way, median, barrier, what have you, that would prohibit those left turns. So again, it was kind of our right to call the question if we didn't think the driveway design by itself could suffice. It was not an invitation to work with us to come up with a left turn option. I just want to be real clear about it. So it's not about a tweak to a design or a dimension or a traffic forecast. We're not arguing little details like that. Our whole basic point was no lefts in and out. And if you can't do it with your driveway design by itself, then you have to work with us in the public right away. Real quick example of where that hasn't worked well for us. Just a couple months ago, the Aldi store on Lyndale 26 South opened. And basically, for that site plan review, we had that first condition, design the driveway to only allow rights in and rights out. We didn't have that second condition. Now, that site has not been successful for us. We've had a lot of issues with cars trying to turn left in and out of the site, and we're going to be working with Aldi's and that developer probably to prohibit those left turns. And just to give you an example of what that looks like, here's one, and you'll be familiar with this, council member. Oops. Kind of the other end of town up northeast, this is Broadway immediately east of Central, where we have Spy House Coffee, a very good attraction. And now that's Tyler Street. That's a street that's right there. That's obviously a public street. But because of the amount of traffic trying to turn left in and out with the backups from Central and what was going on there, we had to work with the county, and we actually prohibit the left turn movement. So just this fall, the county and the city together, this is a picture from the other direction, put out these bollards along the center line there to positively prohibit the left turn. So again, long story short, when we have these kind of developments with these high traffic activities really close to a major intersection, and I could go on and on about Hiawatha, it's on our high crash network, we're really concerned about safety. We just don't see a way that we can accommodate those lefts. So just in closing, I'll say that when we look at safety conditions, there's kind of two words we use. And anytime we do a safety analysis, one of them is a reactive approach, one of them is a proactive approach. In a reactive project, we have a documented safety condition, and we go out there and we try to fix it. This is an example, case in point. From a proactive approach, we try to look at the beginning of a project, whether we're designing a new facility, looking at a site plan or what have you. We try to employ best practices and design that safety in right from the get-go so that we're not coming out after the fact trying to amend it. So just in closing, I'd say we don't feel there's any way that left turns can be served properly for this site, and we're strongly against them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gordon?
This is a question maybe for somebody who could help me understand why the Planning Commission did what they did, so I'm not sure whether that's Public Works or Planning. But the impression I'm getting is that they decided not to impose, they had the full authority to impose this condition on no left turns, but they didn't do it and instead denied the entire application?
That's correct.
Do we know why?
So some of the concerns from commissioners was that if left turns were prohibited into the site as recommended by staff, that it would still create serious vehicular circulation issues, because if left turns are prohibited, how would cars be getting into the drive-through at all? And so there was, some concern that it would be cars going up to the next intersection, taking U-turns, and then coming around to get right turns into and out of the proposed drive-through. I think that, and just kind of the unknown of that, circulation. So even they were not amenable to left turns at Planning Commission, but they also saw that there might be other unintended vehicular consequences of prohibiting left turns, because it would be difficult for folks driving down Hiawatha to get into the site if that's what they were trying to do, if left turns were prohibited. And so it might create other traffic and circulation issues in the neighborhood.
Are there two ways to get into the site?
No, just the one off of 42nd.
42nd.
Mm-hmm.
They could change it, they could have a different site plan.
Because it seemed like there might be a possibility of taking a right turn off of Hiawatha somehow onto the site.
I think
Was that considered?
I think the Public Works, and Alan can speak to this too, just it discourages the new curb cuts onto Hiawatha just because of the nature of the high speeds on that roadway and traffic. But
Yes, and I don't particularly like curb cuts anywhere anyway, but yeah.
Chair, members of the committee, maybe a quick addition to what Lindsay just said. Absolutely, we prohibit or discourage any new access to and from Hiawatha. I'd also note that Hiawatha is Trunk Highway 55. That's under MnDOT's jurisdiction. And we have sort of, I'd say, first line of review on site plans along the Trunk Highway. But every now and then, if there's a question, we'll bring it to them. In the past, when there's been any at all consideration or question about access to Hiawatha, MnDOT's been real firm in denying that. And I'm quite certain we would recommend against it as Minneapolis Public Works, and I'm quite certain MnDOT would disallow it also.
So, and maybe I should wait till after the public hearing, but I'm a little bit curious about what other conditions we could possibly put on something. I think partly all this problem is created because of the idea of the drive-through for their coffee shop instead of just a regular standard coffee shop. And I'm not sure if we have the authority to put a condition on it that they can't operate a drive-through at this point. So it seems like we're missing some conditions to make this okay, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to come up with them in the next 90 minutes, but I'll be listening, or 30 or 25 or 15, but I'll be listening carefully.
Councilmember Goodman?
I'm also wondering if Lindsay, could you answer it just seems nonsensical to me on Hiawatha to have a one-story building with a drive-through. Am I just pointing out something that's obvious, or has that been discussed also? I mean, why would we even what's the zoning going to be in the 2040 plan? What's the zoning currently? I mean, why would we be happy with a one-story building with a drive-through at 42nd and Hiawatha? Isn't that a transit corridor? I mean, if there was ever a definition of one, it would seem to be this one.
yeah, so I think that that's why the initial plan was for a 4-story building with, the 3 stories of additional apartments above this first floor with restaurant and coffee shop drive-through. Initially, the applicant came to Planning Commission hoping for a 1-story drive-through. Or Committee of the Whole, Planning Commission, got feedback that, Planning Commissioners really wanted to see additional density here. They wanted to see something that wasn't just a 1-story building. The zoning right now is, industrial with the I-1 with the industrial living overlay district. And they came back with this other proposal, and then subsequent to that approval have indicated that they're not able to build that as proposed within the time window that they've been given. And so, and obviously the applicant still hasn't spoken yet, but they have indicated that they're interested in adding on additional stories to the building in the future, but obviously that's not part of this proposal, so there wouldn't be any requirement for that as part of this present land use application.
Mr. Chair, what is the 2040 zoning?
It's transit 10.
It's transit 10.
It's transit 10, so that probably says something really loudly to me. And I mean, I am not a big fan of doing this kind of thing in an industrial district anyway, because we have such a limited amount of industrial space. If this was actually like a large job creating industrial site, maybe for like, some sort of production, that would make some sense. But like a coffee shop and an I-1 and then transit 10 sounds like, don't we have enough Starbucks coffee shops? I don't know. Just thinking out loud. I guess I'll stop that now. Thank you.
Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and this is probably for Public Works staff. The issues that were raised by stakeholder input in terms of, okay, we solved the left turn issue, but then does it create other issues? Did you evaluate that, opine on that set of concerns and issues?
Yeah, Chair and members of the committee, and I want to make sure I got the theme of your question, that when you reference stakeholder involvement.
The notion, I think there was some reflection of that in the public discussion with the Planning Commission, that they were concerned that, okay, we solved one set of issues that obviously through policy did, that it would create other issues.
Right. Okay, I think I understand the question. So I think our first approach through policy and safety analysis was to prohibit the left turns. I think the second issues you're referring to are the greater circulation in and around the neighborhood. Lindsay spoke a bit to that a few moments ago. I guess our assumption is, and the applicant may speak to that too if they know their market share and area and whatnot, but vehicles heading northbound on Hiawatha that would want to approach the store, I assume many of them would turn onto 46, probably, I guess, go up to Minnehaha, loop around and come back, make a series of left turns and then a right turn into the site. And now I think that was seen as the disbenefit, if you will, or the greater neighborhood impact that the planning commissioner spoke to, is that there would be access to the site, right in, right out. We allow access to the site, obviously, but for a certain part of the market segment for the store, they would have a more circuitous route. Lindsay also referred to things like people who do jump in off Hiawatha might be tempted to try U-turns. We do see that in certain parts of town where people head off the main street. They want to get in somewhere there's a median or a barrier, and they'll kind of do some funny maneuvers. So it kind of has a spillover effect of, I'll be very firm in saying whatever we do here, we'd always recommend prohibiting the left turns, but then that sometimes has secondary impacts. I think that's what you're referring to.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'll let the record reflect, been joined by the council president. Not seeing any other questions, I'm going to now open the hearing. I'll first give the appellant the opportunity to speak to the committee. Do you have a representative that would like to speak? If you can say your name and address for the record.
Certainly. Yeah. Good morning. My name's Niclas Ellis. I'm the owner, operator, and developer of the Carwash at 42nd and Hiawatha. We're here seeking approval of our site plan with the original 8 conditions that were given to us and not the 2 that were added the following day, 2 days before the Planning Commission. We were scheduled to go to on September 23rd, I think that was. Here's an image of the site. We built this car wash in 1985. We've been there 34 years. It's a very profitable location and continues to be. We started looking at the development of this site in 2014. And literally, we have like 100 different variations of this site. And in talking to potential tenants and in talking to Andrew, the council member, et cetera, we came up with this 2-building concept that has an exposed drive-through and a Starbucks and a restaurant. When we took this plan to the committee of the whole, unanimously, they thought it was a bad idea. They wanted, in fact, one of them said, you got to put housing on this site. Even if it was totally compliant, you got to put housing, otherwise we're going to turn you down. And give you a little bit of background on myself. I used to develop a lot of real estate back in the 80s with my former partner. We developed East Isles in the upper left-hand corner here, Boardwalk and Park Place on the near north side. That was on the cover of the Minneapolis Housing Redevelopment Authority for a couple of years. We developed the old West High School site, okay, with senior 55 and older and townhomes in the back, a YWCA. We built this project called The Lakes over by West Lake Street and Thru Avenue. So we've got a lot of experience in housing. The architect for our 42nd and Hiawatha property is the architect that designed 5 of these 6 projects. So we're very comfortable with housing. So we took all this input about housing. You know, Andrew said housing, you know, you should consider housing. We said, okay, maybe we're wrong. Maybe we should put housing on the site. So we came back with this plan that you're seeing here that has the first level that's identical to the site plan we're looking to get approved today, plus 3 stories of housing above it, 43 micro kind of smaller apartments. And this plan was approved unanimously by the Planning Commission, and there were no restrictions on left turns in and out of the site, okay? So in the spring of 2019, you know, we did more due diligence. We thought the market wasn't ready for housing on the site, okay? So we wanted to take the plan that we had gotten approval on and break it into 2 pieces, phase 1, phase 2. And we got, every department signed off, said it was okay, including the left turn in and out was okay, with 43 units of housing on top, okay? But the planning department told us you can't phase the development because it's somehow different. Even though it's identical and we're breaking it into 2 pieces, we couldn't do that. We had to go back through the Planning Commission. So we did, in fact, just do that. And we submitted the identical plan, just first floor only, and we put in the infrastructure to support 3 stories above it. So the staff issued their report. They had 8 conditions. We were okay with those. And then the following day, they came at us with 2 more left turns in, no left turn in and out, and potential for a median. Okay? Even though none of the plans we ever submitted beforehand brought that issue up. So we asked for a couple of extensions, and we hired Vern Swing, who's standing here with Swing Traffic Solutions, to work with us to come up with a solution to this left turn in and out, okay? And what was really perplexing to us is why Alan would not meet with us. He refused to meet with us. We had to deal with it with him by email or the Public Works Department. So our solution, in fact, improves the situation there, reduces pedestrian safety, increases pedestrian safety, and I'll tell you how. First of all, you might be asking the question, do we have enough stacking spots for the drive-through. Well, according to studies here in the Twin Cities, the average queue for drive-up coffee shops is 9.4 vehicles, and the maximum observed queue is 14. In this yellow highlighted area, those are 14 cars, so we can easily handle, and more if need be. But people aren't going to wait that long. They're going to park. They're going to go inside. So let's take a look at the car wash. It's a very intensive automotive use. And this is by far our biggest, most profitable location that we have. Based on our average ticket sale, we do 500 cars a day coming to our site on an average. And in the wintertime, because of the salt and snow, we actually do more business there. So it actually peaks at an average of 700 vehicles a day. So we have not had much of an issue with cars turning into our site, okay? And cars don't back up to Hiawatha, okay? And I'm not aware of any accidents on 42nd Street. I tried to find out if there were, but it takes 5 to 7 days to get that info. So since the Planning Commission meeting, I asked Starbucks to tell me how much traffic do they project this site's going to generate. They took a look at 4 other locations they have here in the Twin Cities, and they're projecting 463 vehicles a day. So pretty comparable numbers in terms of what our traffic we generate and what Starbucks is projecting to generate. Now, Vern, he's been involved in lots of projects, and I've gotten 4 projects from him that are that he mentioned. First of all, he reconfigured about a third of all the signals in the city of Boston for the city of Boston. He also developed the transportation plan for the America's Cup for the country of Bermuda. He also did a full traffic study for a 1,000-acre site in the city of Blaine called the Lakes. And lastly, he did a transportation demand management plan for the redevelopment of Cross Anderson's headquarter block here in the city. So our solution was to add a left turn lane into, widen the street, take 6 feet of our property, actually 5 feet of our property, and widen the street and create a left turn lane. And the advantages of that, it allows vehicles to bypass going across so they don't have to wait, and it easily handles the traffic to the site both now and in the future. So Vern, using software called Synchro Sim Traffic software that traffic engineer professionals use, came up with the number 40 feet. That represents 95% of the time or less, there'll be 40 feet of cars waiting to turn left. Okay, and this software is recognized all over the country. So what does that look like on our site? You'll see in the lower left-hand side, 2 yellow, that yellow highlighted area, those are the 2 cars. The green is all the remaining space that's available for left turn lanes. So what I did is I actually went, and I'm going to play you this little video snippet. And I'm turning left off of Hiawatha onto 42nd Street. I'm going down the right turn lane, the other lane, and you see these 2 orange cones. That's the 40-foot mark of the left turn lane. So in theory, there are no cars up until that 95% of the time. And let me play that again, because it's just a second here and it'll be done. So as you're making the turn, you can actually easily navigate the left lane and get into the lane so you can go straight across 42nd Street. Helps if I press the start button. So as you can see here, I could easily go into the right lane, go straight, or go down this lane to make my left turn into the site. So the comparison to all of these is not a fair comparison, because if you stop and look at the traffic counts, there's 58% more traffic on Lyndale than there is on 42nd Street. And these, I don't know if this is the right nomenclature, but drop lanes, there are drop lanes all over the city of Minneapolis. There's one at Hennepin and Lake Street where literally you got 2 lanes that could go straight, and the right-hand lane, actually you have to veer off because it drops off at the end of, as you cross Lake Street. And similarly at 36 and Hennepin by Lakewood Cemetery, 1 block west of Lyndale on 26th Street at Aldridge, the lane drops. And at 50th and Colfax, same situation. And there are examples throughout the Twin Cities, such as this one in Crystal. So, will pedestrian safety be affected by adding 5 or 6 feet to the crosswalk? And basically, the amount of time it takes to do that is 2 more seconds. But the signal time on Hiawatha is actually greater than 24 seconds. So it's not going to affect people crossing 42nd Street. And furthermore, if you're going to walk or ride your bike in this area, there are better streets and prettier streets to ride your bike on, which is basically Dite, Snelling, and Minnehaha Avenue. We've got less traffic, better streetscape. And my manager and I were hard pressed to ever remember somebody crossing 42nd Street on Hiawatha, and we've been there 30 plus years. And in the future, Hiawatha Trail, which is adjacent to our site, will be there for people to ride their bikes and walk. And improving safety, we have 2 curb cuts. This one, 26 feet, is a few feet away from the corner of 42nd and Hiawatha. That is going to be removed once we redevelop this site. And there's an improved road alignment between cars going back and forth across Hiawatha because the roads line up better than they do now. And basically, I want to summarize a couple of things here. Andrew Johnson responded to somebody that was objecting to the redevelopment of our site. You know, back in 2018, we were asked to put in housing and we almost demanded to put in housing. And so we responded by doing that. And in June of 2019, we met with Andrew, and he asked us, sorry, it was probably before then, asked us to reach out to housing developers on this site because we didn't think it was ready. Maybe somebody else thought it was ready. So we reached out to 18 developers and never got anywhere with any of them. And to this date, we still haven't heard back. And when faced with these last-minute additions to the criteria to approve, we went out and hired 2 consultants to try to solve this problem. And, you know, we've been asked by some people, what guarantee do we have you're going to do housing? Well, we'll gladly do housing. We're a for-profit developer. Why wouldn't we do it? Okay, if we thought we could fill the space, we would be doing it. We determined we couldn't. We talked to 18 developers who didn't express an interest in doing that. So the site is not ready for housing today, but we're putting in the infrastructure to do that so that we can build. And given now that the 2040 plan has been approved, we can build more than the 3 stories that we originally thought we could do. And the thing that's really the most discouraging thing about this, I've been working on this for 5+ years. I've spent over $100,000 in real money and probably another $100,000 of my time. And to come this far and then have Alan tell us he isn't willing to meet with Vern, who he knows, is ridiculous, in my opinion, and should never be, another developer shouldn't be faced to have to do that. And I'll open up to any questions you have. And Vern can answer any specific questions you have.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Busalis. Where is the car wash now in the site plan?
It is in this, kind of where the Starbucks, you see the Starbucks here in the building at the top north of the site? Oh, here, can I point it out here?
Yeah.
It's, you can see my mouse, it's essentially right here.
So you're eliminating the car wash?
Yeah, it's gone.
The most profitable thing you had going on, now you're eliminating for a Starbucks?
And.
Just want to make sure I understand that.
And restaurant space and offices and eventually housing, that's correct.
Okay, so there is no more car wash? That's what
Correct.
I was under the impression the car wash was profitable, therefore you were
It is.
keeping it.
It is,
But you're not keeping it.
correct, because we can't fit it on, otherwise we would have.
Can you show me the ingress and egress pattern currently for the car wash?
That would be back at the first photo. Go back there. So here's one curb cut towards, oh, thanks. So there's one curb cut here, and then there's one curb cut, which is the one we'd be eliminating. That's next to the corner.
I see. And so the curb cut that you've been using for this auto-related use,
Right.
you'd go down one curb cut to a less auto-related use.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, can I just ask Lindsay and Mr. Klugman? Mr. Klugman, why wouldn't you meet with them? You knew someone was going to ask the question, so.
Sure. Chair, council members, I might characterize it a little different, if I may. Stuff happened fast. I'll acknowledge that stuff happened fast. Vern and I have known each other probably 15, 20 years in the profession. He's a good professional, so let's be real, clear about that. The design team sent me 3 hand-drawn sketches with marker pen on top of aerials. We responded to those. We were very clear in saying we didn't support the left turn. We're not looking to see how to make it work. We felt there was nothing to work with. I'll just say it that way. So, and kind of like I said in my opening remarks, it wasn't about tweaking the layout to come up with the final one that Mr. Basalis presented. We were saying no left turn. We were getting hand-drawn sketches with marker pen. I didn't see any way to bridge that gap. I'll just tell you that. So I'd like to say I was responsive via phone calls and emails. We didn't feel that meeting in person and sort of working out a design together for a left turn was what we were trying to achieve.
Okay, so currently they have a car-related use that is car washes.
Mm-hmm.
They have 2 curb cuts, so this use would be better than that use, right?
Okay, I would not characterize you. I'd rather not use the word better. I'll acknowledge that the number of curb cuts goes from 2 to 1. Clearly
That's
reduction
good.
there.
That's 50% reduction.
That's a reduction, right? I'll go back to what I said about our proactive approach to safety. And managing access is one of the most important things we can do, especially in a busy road like this. I don't envy the position you're in. I know it's really tough when 2 engineers are arguing numbers and statistics and modeling forecasts and things like that. And I'm not trying to dispute the numbers that Mr. Basalis presented. I know from my experience, Councilmember Schrader, you have a fairly recent coffee shop in your ward. My colleagues in St. Paul talk about the Starbucks at Marshall and Snelling. I could go on and on. These coffee shops are notorious for their peaking characteristics. We have backups on 42nd. In fact, I think just ironically, this random photo that's in the city aerial photo base, and I don't know what time of day it was taken, but the random photo shows a queue that extends beyond where the driveways are. I mean, that's the sort of thing that these left turns coming in or out are going to contend with. So, Councilmember Goodman, back to your question, I agree that 1 driveway is better than 2. Moving the driveway as furthest east as possible is the right direction to do, but there's nothing in that that would cause me or my colleagues in Public Works to support left turns into that facility. And again, I just want to say one more time, our proactive approach to safety and, the way we look at these things, it's not just saying, where was their problem, what can I do to stop that or change that? It's what can I do to prevent problems and situations in the future. And that's why we're so intent on managing access to this type of site.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I feel like the problem here is that the fabulous is getting in the way of the good. This is better than it was, and I can't get an answer from anyone. I mean, I feel like there's a property right. Look, I don't like drive-thrus. I was one of the people, along with others on this panel who will remain nameless, who have the same name as me, who don't like drive-thrus. But this, like, you know, I know Eric's going to have a nervous breakdown, but this kind of borders on a taking to me. That they have 2 curb cuts. They're going down to 1. They're going from a car-related use to a somewhat car-related use. They're developers, so I mean, they've done projects around the city. Our staff, it doesn't look good to say we won't meet with them. I'm not sure, I feel like this has to kind of go back to the council office to negotiate something. I don't really want to negotiate something here, but I can kind of see where this is headed. I'm not empathetic about having a drive-through. I'm like the last person to be empathetic about that, but I don't think we can work this out. I will tell you, Mr. Busalis, we're not going to let you put in a new lane to accommodate your drive-through. Our whole Vision Zero plan is to have less space across, not more. So I don't see how that's an alternative. I feel like we're caught in this weird situation where we're being asked here to basically like redesign his plan.
So maybe it'd be helpful, one of the discussions we had at Planning Commission, Ms. Ellis talked a lot about just how the coffee shop would not even be viable if there was a left turn lane in, and if the left turn would not be allowed. And so while that discussion was going on, some of it just, I can speak only for myself, but if you can't make that work, like it was a lot of work to try and make that use work on that site. And then one thing that I would add is we didn't have the same numbers about the car wash. I mean, it is something, if you have a really good use there already, and of course you can do whatever you want with your property, like it begs the question of some of the other arguments that have been used for this. I don't know if that helps at all.
Not so much, because we have an open public hearing. I'm conscious of that. I'm also conscious that this could be heading towards court pretty quickly. They have 2 curb cuts and they use like hundreds of cars, and now they're going to have 1 curb cut and they're going to have less cars, and we're saying that we want housing, therefore we want to tell them what to do with their property. Well, if we want to tell them what to do, we might as well buy it. I don't see how we get away with telling them that the fabulous has to be in place instead of the good, when what's there now arguably is bad. But I don't think they should be telling us that we should create a new lane for them, because that is completely contrary to everything we're doing right now. I can see Mr. Klugman's concern. Yeah. I just feel like, do we not have time to have people collaborate to try to work something out rather than us having to rule? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Councilmember, we responded with a left turn lane because of the criteria that were added to our approval. So we are comfortable with not adding a left turn lane, but we're just trying to respond to the objection that Public Works had. And the only reason we sent sketches to Alan is because we couldn't develop a full plan because we had no conversation going. So we were putting a sketch together. Does this work? No. Put another sketch together? No. If you can't talk to people and have a communication like Councilmember Goodman is trying to do, how do we solve the problem? Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm okay with whatever we need to do to try to work out a solution to this situation, if that's amenable.
Just to get some clarity on what you just said, so you would be, if the condition was put on that there's no left turn, you would be fine not improving this.
No.
Okay,
no,
I just want to be clear that you're against the left-hand turn.
I need a left turn into the site, for sure. Yeah, we have 2. In fact, we have some people who drive in the wrong one.
I'm going to stop that. We've got Councilmember Gordon.
So I'm very familiar with this intersection. I've used your car wash before. I've watched how the cars trickle in. They spend a long time there cleaning out their garbage, washing out, and then they trickle out. I've gone by a lot of coffee shops, and I see how the lines pile up, usually during rush hour when most cars are on the street, when people are going to work, and that's when they want to quickly get their cup of coffee. Did you do some traffic counts about time of day and when the peaks will be for Starbucks around the city?
Vern, go ahead.
Yes, I've actually been the traffic engineer for several Starbucks that have gone in, and I have observed for recently observed for a different project for existing Starbucks or Caribou's in the Northwest Metro. And from those observations, your intuition is correct. There's more traffic coming in the morning than during the rest of the day. If you look at Starbucks, their own statistics, from 7 to 11, they get 39% of their traffic. The remainder of the day, they get the other 60%.
When do people usually go to wash their cars?
And people go to wash their cars. There is a morning peak, and there is a big afternoon peak.
And there's
when people
a lot
are
of
headed
Saturday,
home.
probably Saturday and Sunday washers.
And Saturday is even greater.
Yeah.
But when you look at ITE statistics for those things, the amount of ITE being the Institute of Transportation Engineers statistics for those things, the amount of traffic during those peaks that are going to the car wash in the PM is in fact nearly analogous to the amount of people going to the Starbucks in the AM. So it will change the peaking characteristic for the site. However, the amount of traffic on Hiawatha is roughly 35% higher during the PM peak than it is during the AM peak, and on 42nd it's about equal. So when you look at all of that together, I think the existing condition is pretty. The traffic at the driveways in the existing condition is analogous to the traffic at the driveways in the proposed condition.
And I'll just also offer that typically when you're going to go wash your car somewhere, you figure out your route. It's not something you're zooming into on your way. So having to go to Minnehaha and come up and approach it from that direction is a very different story. It seems like you're worried about losing business from the people who are going to see a minor inconvenience because it would have to take them out of their way to plan their stop at the coffee shop. I'll also note, and I know in the public hearing, and I don't want to have this debate, but Councilmember Goodman kind of started it. Hiawatha is a notoriously terrible street to cross. 42nd has a lot of traffic. That's a major feeder to it. So in the morning, this is going to already be clogged and already be snarled. And if you look at this picture and you imagine there's some people coming over here, maybe to get to St. Paul or whatever, it's already backed up here with people waiting to cross. The left turning is going to be an issue. I can really relate to our traffic staff who identified it as an issue. Even if you had it, I think it would be so terrible for people, it wouldn't even bring you much business because they'd realize, I can't get through there. I'm going to go get my coffee at the next drive-through, or I'm going to get it somewhere else. But anyway, that's just my little speech. But I'd love to finish the public hearing before we do so much of debate, but I know we're already in the middle of it.
I think the 95th percentile Q analysis that we've done, I don't think that does take into account that peaking characteristic that you're talking about. The analysis itself was done during the AM for the AM peak with the AM peak demand, and that's looking at basically a two-car queue that will happen, 5% of the time or less.
No,
So,
95%.
Cars are backed up waiting to get
Or less.
across Hiawatha.
yes, but
That's going to be
there are cars waiting back to get across Hiawatha today.
right, and they're not trying to. Then there aren't another competing bunch of cars
But there
trying
are
to make a
people
left turn where they can't because they're blocked.
But there are people today that are using the car wash during the peak times. It's not a right in, right out movement. That's a full movement.
Typically,
So
during rush hour, I would absolutely plan on making a right turn into your car wash. I wouldn't think I'd be able to get easy access because I know how it backs up on 42nd because I live near there. So, maybe you're right, maybe you're not. I don't think you've counted the left turners at morning rush hour.
Councilmember Reich, and then City Attorney.
Thank you. And the reason I've got in the queue is because this might be questions that could add to the response from our attorney. Insofar as that we have, actions that are being imposed upon through the review process that might be legally concerning. Clearly, sort of mandating a principle when it's not necessarily tied to the land use rights that they already enjoy would be somewhat capricious. However, we're the check on that. Our volunteer body could do that. It could be concerning. We come and we can sort of be a check on that authority, and we can take that into account and make appropriate decisions, both policy and legally. So I'm not too worried about that. But in terms of legal complications arising from the consistent application of, say, transportation policy, wouldn't it be the converse? That if we started to be capricious and say, well, sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not, that could be concerning down the road. So the consistency, and that's why conversations can be short. No means no. Second time, no means no. Third time, no means no. That's the conversation. It was a conversation. It just happened to be somewhat brief and terse and to the point. So I just wanted to fold that into maybe other comments that you make. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, committee members, I just wanted to reiterate that your decision is guided by existing current regulation and current comp plan, which is the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth. And sort of sussing out specifically coffee shop impacts and looking at that as somewhat of a tangent. Coffee shops are permitted use here. It's not a conditional use. If it was a conditional use, we could be looking at some of those specific aspects of coffee shop uses that might be problematic, but it's not. It's permitted. And as has been noted, the drive-through aspect of it also was essentially in under the gun. The application was complete before the prohibition went into effect. So we have the existing regulations and the existing policy, and that is what is guiding your decision. I understand that some of that may significantly change in the future, but we are where we are.
Oh, you're in queue, Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I mean, I think this is consistent with what the city attorney just said, but I did want to just remind us all, and especially for the record, that staff did recommend approval of the buildings under the existing land use law, but our staff also recommended or included that there not be allowed to have a left turn on this site, which, I mean, I am not a traffic engineer, nor is anyone up here, but looking at this aerial photo, I can understand why it would be reasonable not to want to have cars queuing across this intersection where cars are then turning right into the queued cars while those are trying to pass across an intersection, again, where people will be walking. I mean, we can debate traffic engineering, but a reasonable person could look at this aerial photo with cars going every which way and understand why adding that movement in a land use that generates traffic at peak period would be problematic and not consistent with all of our adopted policies about transportation planning and engineering. And so I mean, if that's the kind of critical piece that we are talking about, I just wanted to say, again, for the record, that is a part of every single site plan review and in the purview of the city of Minneapolis to understand that how new uses are impacting traffic patterns and safety. And all of our policies say that we prioritize the most vulnerable users, pedestrians and bicyclists, transit riders as a transit-rich area. And so I think the conversation we're having is consistent with those values and policies.
Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you. I agree with Councilmember Bender. The problem that we're going to have and that we're going to sounds like be defending is we didn't do any of that when they had housing above it. So when they had housing above it and they had a coffee shop with the drive-through enclosed, we didn't say they couldn't take a left turn. And now we're saying they can't. That's, I think, a concern. And maybe I misunderstood that. So, Mr. Brusales, were you told you couldn't have a left turn when you showed a site plan that had a housing component and then it also had like an under the building drive-through?
You have it correct. We were not told. We were able to left in, left out with housing on it.
So I don't know.
The Planning Commission approved that?
What?
The Planning Commission approved that?
Yes. Yeah. We have a 2-year conditional use permit that we could go out and build it today if we wanted to, but the housing part doesn't work.
Right. So, I mean, I just want us to all think about how court's going to view that when they did what we wanted, we didn't bring this thing up, and now all of a sudden we brought it up when they're not doing what we want. I don't know. I'm just pointing out where we have weaknesses should we determine that we're not going to agree to this. And everyone can make their determination. I'm not subscribing judgment. I'm just saying I'm looking at the facts, and a neutral person's also going to be looking at these same facts. And I don't think the facts bode well. Add that we couldn't have staff meet with them. I mean, I don't know. This looks bad to me.
And on top of it, the volume is roughly the same. So it's like there isn't a need in theory for a left turn lane. We'd be glad to put one in, but in theory, there isn't a need because we're driving 500 cars there a day on average.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. Thank you very much. I'm going to now open the hearing to the members of the public. So anyone that would like to address the committee, please limit your comments to 2 minutes per person, which will be tracked by the timer near the clerk. Would any members of the public like to speak? Anyone interested in speaking? Any interested in speaking? Seeing no one, the hearing is now closed. Yes.
I just did want to clarify one thing about the previous project that was approved by the Planning Commission. That project had been to preliminary development review to the meeting, and there was a preliminary report, but there were no approvals that had been issued by Public Works at that point in time. So the final approval from Public Works Traffic had not been received before when the approval was made for the other version of this project. So that was something that was still very much up for conversation with Public Works at that time.
Thank you very much for adding that. Any other discussion? All right, I'm just waiting for the side conversation to end. I did close the public hearing. All right, we had a lively conversation 3 minutes ago, and now it seems to be died down. So I'm just checking. Council President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For purposes of discussion, I will move to deny the appeal, and that would leave us with the recommendation that came forward from Planning Commission.
Councilmember Gordon?
I'm just curious how much we're going to have our hands tied because of the timing of this. Do we need to make a decision on this right now, or did I miss that question already?
Yes.
Lindsay could answer too, but the applicant did voluntarily extend their 120 deadline, so I believe that that would allow us to continue this one cycle to the December 5th CNP meeting. Is that correct?
I believe so. And then, I think that there was a point where there was a discussion about, working out some other solution. I think we are subject to this current 60-120 or however long it's extended because the applicant could not redesign the project and come back with the drive-through because of the new drive-through ordinance.
Thank you.
So
any other question?
It might be fruitful for us to delay this a little bit. It sounds like we could delay it one cycle, so I'll just put that out there in terms of that, and there might give some opportunity for some more work and negotiation, perhaps even with the council member's office there, who's been obviously involved in this for some time.
Is that something the appellant would be open to?
Is that just, if I understand correctly, a delay till the next, when's the next meeting? Just
December 4th? 5th.
Sure. Yes, assuming we can have a discussion with all parties concerned.
Is that okay? That's fine with the previous motion. Is there another? All right.
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to withdraw my motion and substitute it with the motion to postpone this item one cycle.
All right. Not seeing anything else. Council President's motion is before us. All those in. This is to delay till the next ZMP.
Change to my motion? Okay.
Yes. All right. All those in favor, Councilmember Goodman?
Well, I was one of the people that suggested a delay initially, and I'm okay with that if we're trying to figure out a way to make this work. If this is just a delay in order to dig in and say, okay, now we're not going to do anything, then we might as well go ahead and vote on it and let them proceed to court. So I just want to be clear that I don't want to delay this just to delay it to run the clock out. We have to find some sort of solution that is acceptable to us where everyone's going to come to the table and sit down and figure out what a compromise might be. Not everything the developer wants or everything the city wants, but that's better than having a court tell us how it's going to go down.
Councilmember Gordon?
That's my sense of it too. I think we're talking about a site plan approval here, and so this is a lot of these is permitted stuff. So I think that the idea is we'll find a win-win situation where our professional traffic staff will have some of their concerns met and addressed, and we'll come up with a better plan, and then the project will go forward. I think that's the hope of the delay that I was talking about.
All right, not seeing any other questions. Council President's motion is before us. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no, and the ayes have it. Finally, we have number 5, which is an ordinance relating to intentional communities and cluster developments, and we'll begin with a brief staff presentation.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Medell Duenas, and I am a senior city planner in the co-development team, and I am here to discuss the intentional community cluster development ordinance. So this ordinance was originally introduced to the City Council on last year on December 7th, and the intent of this amendment is to allow a configuration of small dwelling or rooming units and a common house on the lot. This amendment will also provide an innovative and affordable housing option for residents who are either housing stable or unstable. There are multiple policies that support this amendment in the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth, as well as a specific action step supporting the implementation of intentional community cluster developments in Minneapolis 2040. Over the past several months, the co-development team and I have done 5 in-depth case studies on these types of developments across the country, as well as working with an organization here in Minneapolis that plans to build intentional community cluster developments across the county, many of which are here. This organization is called Envision Community. It is made up of various organizations such as the Street Voices of Change, Alchemy Architects, Hennepin Healthcare's Upstream Health Innovations, and the list goes on. So here on the screen you can see their plan to have a housing pods and have these replicated across the county. Each housing pod has 2 units with a shared entrance and shared toilet, and then a common house that has shared facilities such as kitchens, bathrooms, etc. So that is one possibility of what this amendment, of one of the possible outcomes that could happen. These are other possible scenarios that are based off of case studies that we have done. So there could also be dwelling units on a lot, such as the ones here. The dwelling units, again, they include kitchen and bath. There could also be rooming units plus a common house. So the rooming units could include a restroom, or they could just include a sleeping room. And then again, if there are rooming units, there must be a common house that includes the shared facilities. There could also be rooming houses plus the common house, which again is individual units for tenants, and also rooming houses with shared facilities. So moving on, I'm going to get into some of the development standards. These types of communities should be operated by either a nonprofit organization, a government agency, or a healthcare agency. They would be allowed anywhere that intentional communities and cluster developments are allowed. So basically that means that they could be allowed anywhere in the city except for the industrial zones. With Minneapolis 2040, there are districts that there would be more appropriate, and that is Interior 1, 2, and 3, and Corridor 3 and 4. Anything above is required to have 4+ stories, and given the nature of these types of tiny homes, they probably just wouldn't meet that requirement. So the minimum number of units per lot would be 2, and again, either dwelling units or rooming units would be allowed. Again, if there are rooming units, they must include a common house that has all the other shared facilities. In the lower density zoning districts, so that's R1 through R2B, 650 square feet must be allotted per bed. That means that on a 10,000 square foot lot, which is the minimum lot size that would be required. This means that there could be 15 beds. In the higher density districts, there would be a minimum of 325 square feet per bed, which would equal about 31 beds. Again, the lot size, the minimum for these developments would be 10,000 square feet. And then the setbacks and lot widths would be as required by district as they are now. The maximum impervious and lot coverage would also be as required by district, as well as the floor area ratio. There would be no off-street parking requirements. One bicycle parking stall would be required per 4 beds, and 90% of that would have to be long-term bicycle parking within enclosed or secured areas. There should also be a sufficient storage provided for each resident. So cases like this in Licton Springs, Washington would not happen. Safety was also a consideration. There should be safe passages from each dwelling or rooming unit to the common building and throughout the site. Consistent with other types of cluster developments, 40% of the land on these developments would be for a common space. This does not include the common house, but includes landscape yards, recreational areas, wetlands, water bodies, and parking facilities. The minimum distance between structures would be 10 feet, as consistent with the current cluster development standards. And all of the units within these developments would be subject to the site plan review standards for multifamily structures with 4 or more units. Moving on to the common building, the common house would have the same window requirements and the same maximum height as required by district. They should be a minimum of 18 feet wide and 500 square feet, which again, they should include kitchen, toilets, showers, and gathering spaces for residents. And they should be located no more than 200 feet from the doors of every single unit within the development, and they should be nearest the lot line to the property. For the dwellings or the rooming units, the window and height requirements, again, would be the same. One of the major changes for this, again, rooming units would now be allowed. There is no minimum width requirements, so given the nature, again, of these tiny homes, they could be as narrow as the building code or the housing maintenance code allows. Prefabricated and manufactured homes would also be allowed in these developments. And let's see, and then one of the last things, except for the minimum lot area, the City Planning Commission could be able to approve any alternatives to requirements that these developments where strict adherence is impractical because of the site location or conditions, and the proposed alternative meets the intent of these requirements. So just lastly, I wanted to go over briefly some of the obstacles that we identified outside of the zoning code. And some of these has to do with the foundations. Originally, for some of these developments, a frost footing or anchor system, or I'm sorry, the pier foundation diamond piers were originally proposed, but they would not be allowed by code for a habitable structure. The composting toilets is another issue, that the Minnesota Plumbing Code does not allow composting toilets for buildings used for human habitation unless approved by the building official. Plumbing was another obstacle, another potential obstacle. We spoke with Dan Huff, the previous Minneapolis environmental health director, and one of his concerns was that not providing plumbing to the rooming units could be a huge health concern for residents within these developments. And then lastly, the housing maintenance code does not allow kitchen or bathroom facilities to be accessed when leaving a dwelling, a rooming unit. So that was it. Do you have any questions?
Councilmember Gordon?
So in terms of the units, the plumbing's not required though, correct?
Right.
Then I also had a question about the space between the units. You said there's a 10 feet requirement between them.
Yes.
And some of the designs I saw for the Envision seem to have the units touching.
So right, so that would be allowed.
Okay.
They would be then just considered as one building.
Okay. one long kind of hallway-looking building. I understand. I guess and in terms of the foundation problem, is your understanding that people can still move forward with some of their plans, having to build a bigger foundation?
Yeah, we spoke with Dan Callahan, and he suggested that either a frost footing or an anchor system that meets mobile home codes would be acceptable for these types of foundations.
Okay. So I want to rave about this fantastic staff report and all the incredible work that's gone into this, both your work and the team's work, but also from the community, bringing this idea forward. I have to say that I'm very excited about the potential for this. I'm a little nervous about it, but I think we did a really good job of crafting an ordinance that has some safeguards in place. I really think it's critical that we're looking at who the operators are that are doing it. I also think that puts a big responsibility on our first projects to make them really shine and be really good and really work well. If these kinds of things could fit into the communities throughout the city, that would be fantastic. I know some of the concerns that we've had is if we look at how other cities have done it sometimes, and it seems to be tucked in industrial fences around it, and that's not the concept that we're trying to work with here. This is something I think that we want to be celebrated and integrated into our communities, and I know it's going to be a big challenge getting all the funding and getting the projects done and finding the right site to do it in, but I think there'll be a lot of champions for that. And I don't know if we want to take a moment to just hear from some of our community very briefly, but I'd appreciate that, but if we don't have time, I understand that too.
Council President Bender?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was curious about this question about the toilet facilities. I know that was one of the things that we saw in the navigation center was the challenge of having folks needing to leave where they were sleeping to use a restroom. And just wondered if you could talk more about why you landed on this, how it's being presented. I think this is really great work, and I'm also really excited about how we can learn from, learn from this experience. But that one really stuck out to me and just wanted a little more information.
So we spoke with Dan Callahan, and he wanted to put it out there that, again, unless approved by the building official, the composting toilets would not be allowed in a habitable structure. But in the past, they have not been approved. But one of his suggestions was possibly trying like a prototype just to see how it would work out, or not having all of the units in their first model be composting toilets, but again, just testing it to see what would happen.
Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It has to be really low barrier to entry, as we know, in order to build something. And so plumbing is really expensive. I would love to see us pursue this composting toilet thing as a pilot to see if that, it works in cabins all over the state of Minnesota and environmental areas where people are super sensitive. So I think that might be something to do. I just raised this to just congratulate you on the work you've done. It's just really fantastic. I've been working with Hennepin prior to John Pryor's departure for a long time on this, and we've looked at these in Madison and in Olympia, Washington, and it definitely seems like it's something we should do in the city. Just the level of work that our staff have done to get this to reality is really impressive, so congratulations to you and to the whole team and Councilmember Gordon's office for getting us this far.
Great. Well, I also just want to thank you for all your work. This is to make it look this clear and this well defined took a lot of work to get there. I also just want to thank Street Voices for Change and everybody. I think it's just it's been phenomenal working on this project to just have kind of your voices front and center and have this really reflect what you see as community. Council President Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one last comment following that question. I really just want to highlight that how supportive I am and how thankful I am that we are recommending incorporating these into the residential districts of our city, and that's where they belong. And I know it took probably extra work to think about how the design of a cluster development would fit into different configurations of city lots. But the fact that we landed on a recommendation that incorporates this type of living into our residential areas is the right thing to do. And I think, the direction that our city is going, and I'm really grateful to see that as part of this.
All right, with that, I'm going to move approval of number 5. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no, and the ayes have it, and the motion carries. Seeing no further business before the community, we are adjourned.